All right, I think that this is maybe our second or third repeat customer, Ray, having Gord
Yeah,
Miller on the Ray and Dregs podcast. We have him back. It was season 1, wasn't it?
yeah. This is you're getting onto the honor roll here,
This is
coming
my
back a
third
second
time.
time.
My third
Is
time.
it?
My third time.
I think you're confusing. No, I feel like we did a Dreger Cafe with the two of you somewhere
No, we
in
did. We
Europe.
did one of these at the World Junior, and we did one just prior to the World Championship. I believe this is my. I'm pretty sure this is my third time around.
Well,
You're
that's our
kind of
mistake.
like the
Ray.
regular guest on Johnny Carson. Just kept coming back
Yeah,
and back and
couldn't
back.
get rid of me.
Well, you're in sunny Florida,
Mhm.
following the Ottawa Senators, which can be challenging at times, but it's nice to be as close to normal as you are, right? Because you guys, especially, Ray, it's a little different with ESPN, but you guys have grown accustomed through the pandemic of doing games in arenas with no players, no fans, or in makeshift facilities, in television studios across Canada. So this is like old times for you, Gord.
Yeah, fortunately, we've only been calling games off a monitor for the last month and a half, and that was due
Yeah.
to the issues. I mean, Ray, as you know, some of our crews got stuck in the U.S. in early January. Guys tested positive for COVID and couldn't come back for a couple of weeks. So, to be safe for the last 7 weeks or so, we haven't been traveling to the United States. And so, as of March 1st, we are. So, we called a game last night in Tampa, and it's just so much. Ray,
Oh,
it's just so
So
much
better.
better. I mean, from a play-by-play perspective, I mean, all of a sudden the whistle, you're calling a game off the tube, all of a sudden the whistle would sound, you're okay, play stopped, and the trail referee makes a penalty call, or it's too many men, or like there's just all these things, or two of the worst ones are the puck goes down in the corner, okay, so then it goes back to the point and then gets shot on goal. You have no chance to see who shot that puck. And if it was tipped, no chance. I mean, it's hard enough live. It's tough enough live to see it, but you have no chance. And the other one is when suddenly there's a 2-on-1, and all of a sudden the guy drops it back out of frame, and this third guy comes skating in from off camera, right, and shoots the puck. Oh, look, it's a 2-on-1. No, actually, it's a 3-on-1, and that guy just scored. And who was that? Is he a right shot? Is he a left shot? Is he tall? Is he short? Who was that?
I really hope we get back to, where, there's been this line of, okay, it's for safety and for COVID, and
Yeah.
but there's also this little budget thing, and I hope the industry
Yeah.
sees the value in
yeah.
us being able to present the game like it should be presented.
Well, certainly, there's a number of sporting events that you see that are called off monitors routinely. Tennis,
Yeah.
almost all of Tennis Channel is called now because everything happens within the frame. In a tennis match, everything happens in the frame. I would say, and I would say there are other sports, skiing, others that it's not practical to have a commentator on the course. You'd be watching it on TV anyway. I think people would be surprised to know how much golf is called off TV. Because you don't have most golf broadcasts don't have a commentator on every hole. So they're watching a lot of it off a monitor. But for sports, especially football, baseball, hockey, very tough to do it off of television. And I'm still amazed, guys. It's funny watching the Super Bowl and thinking that the live angle that we see in football, you still can't see the guys downfield. Like when the ball is snapped, you have no idea what's happening down the field.
Right. And it's like a mystery box down there.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's that guy wide open. I mean, I remember I did an audition years ago to be a football announcer at CBC when I was like, I don't know, 20 or 21. And they had you do it. You called a game off the monitor that was on tape. And so this guy's, takes the punt. And he's going, and he'll score. And this guy runs into the frame, jumps on his back and tackles him. Well, or not.
Or not.
Didn't work out so well. No. I mean, we could tell production stories all day here because collectively we've got enough of them. But in all seriousness, a big part of the reason we wanted to invite you on the Ray and Dregs podcast again, Gord, is because of your close connections and tight affiliation with international hockey, right? And the community that is around international hockey. And you've done a magnificent job of connecting us with some of the real, true war stories that we're getting from Ukraine. Friends internationally, including some in Ukraine, and you've shared some of those tweets of the real life experiences that these people are living hour by hour. I mean, it's tough stuff.
It's horrendous, and there's no other way to put it. And I've been to war zones before, but certainly not. I've never been on the front line of a war zone, and I'm careful what I say and what I post, because I've been sent videos and photos that are horrific. Horrific. I mean, of bodies and you name it, and these are people who are friends in a country that was peaceful. It's hard to see the juxtaposition. One of my friends in Ukraine, I was texting with him. I said, are you worried about a potential invasion? No, not really. I said, but there's like 170,000 Russian troops on the border. And they said, well, we've had Russian troops on our border all of our lives. Yeah, but he was skiing with his kids in the Carpathians. Like he was skiing the Saturday and Sunday before the invasion. They'd gone skiing, and so there they are. He's with his family. And then on Tuesday, he drove his wife and his kids to the Slovak border, dropped them off, and then went back to fight. And the three of us are all parents. How can you put yourself in that position? And he's now armed, and he's on night patrols on the outskirts of Kiev, so that the regular Ukrainian army can get a rest and be alerted to fight. So they're out wandering around the suburbs of Kiev looking for Russian units that are coming in. It's beyond horrific. And we have a Telegram chat that there's six friends from Ukraine, and I sort of are on every day and sort of to check in. And I'm trying to arrange lawyers for them to get their families to Canada, and what little, the biggest thing you feel is helplessness. Hooking them up with a lawyer seems like the smallest.
I was just going to ask, Gord, what in your conversations, like, what do they want us to know, or do they just want to vent to you and talk to you?
No, I think their number one concern, the number one thing that comes through, is their concern that people in Russia don't know what's really happening. That the propaganda in Russia is so overwhelming, and that there are no independent voices there. So they feel like the Russian people are probably behind this because they don't really know what's going on. That's not really the case. And you guys know, we all know people in Russia, and I know lots of people in Russia that I'm in contact with, discreetly. You can't communicate by text or email or anything like that, but on things like Telegram and Signal and WhatsApp, you can. Well-educated, traveled Russians know what's going on. A friend of mine had the best way to put this about news in Russia. He said he was watching Russian TV recently, and there was a documentary about how the power grid is so much improved. The new power grid is so much better than the old one. But he didn't see the end of it because halfway through the power went off. Right. So they know. Russians know that they're being fed misinformation. Do they have a full picture of what's really going on? Probably not. But that's one of the biggest concerns, Darren, to answer your question about that they have. And secondly, they need help. They need food. They would like NATO to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And obviously, that's not going to happen. And so, but they need help, and they need it now. This is a dire situation there. There are millions of people in immediate jeopardy. And I mean immediate jeopardy.
Well, Gord, you sent a text. We were texting on the weekend, and you mentioned that Dmitry Kristich, who I played with in Los Angeles, had gone back into the zone, if you will, and is now on the lines. and we just saw him in November. He was fundraising and gathering information to help the Ukraine hockey program grow and develop. And I mean, it was just a couple of months ago. I played with him in Los Angeles. It's unfathomable for me, just in that little connection, to know somebody that is actually there.
Sure. So, and Ray, we met with that delegation in Toronto. So there was 8 of them. I had a nice dinner with them, and Dimitri, it's funny. Dima was known for being a bit of a grouchy character when he played, but
didn't talk much.
Yeah, he was afraid of losing his job. He felt like he didn't have a lot of people to talk to. But I will share because I think we wanted to think about the good of people. Dima lived on my street in Toronto when he played for the Leafs, and one Saturday there's a bunch of kids playing street hockey, and he came out and asked them and told them to stop because he was trying to get his pregame nap in. So these poor kids were admonished by a Toronto Maple Leaf. They felt terrible, right? So so the next day he came out and he played with them, and they loved it, right? I mean, this Toronto Maple Leaf played street hockey with them, and from then on, the kids on the street looked at the schedule, and on game days they made sure they played street hockey further away from Dima's house so he could get his pregame nap in. But the other funny part was when that delegation came to Toronto, they went to Winnipeg, then Ottawa, then Toronto, and when they got to Toronto, Dimitri said, "I'm going to take you guys to the best restaurant in Toronto." And the group invited me to come because I'd arranged some meetings for them. And so he took them to the Keg. And so,
Nice.
so by the airport, so we're sitting there and we're having dinner. And the president of the federation, Georgi, whose English was kind of shaky, leaned into me and said, "This is best restaurant." And said, "What? I love Keg." And so Dimitri is in an area right now that there's not a lot of fighting where he is. I won't say where he is, just out of respect for him. I don't want to give locations where people are and names, but where Dima is, there's not a lot of fighting right now. His wife is a paramedic, so he's been assisting her with the sick and injured, and so he right now is relatively safe. There's been no shelling or missiles striking near him. But friends in Kyiv and other parts of the country, are living in basements, and they stored up food and water, but there's the power is going on and off, and so we check in every day on Telegram. And one day, one of the group didn't check in for 24 hours, and you're terrified. These are you guys have been to the World Championship. We've all been together. We sit in those hospitality lounges. It's the best part of going to those things, I think. Are the friendships we make, and the friendships we make, and the the bonds that we make, and these will be friends of mine for life. And I just it's really hard. I find that I just sit here and I watch TV, and I look at Twitter, and I spend all day. What happens for me is that at about 5 o'clock Eastern time, it's just after midnight there. I hope they're sleeping. I hope their kids are okay. And then I I kind of at midnight when they're waking up, check in to see if they're okay. And they're separated from their families. I mean, taking your kids to the border is, like I said, unimaginable.
Yeah. I want an opinion from both of you guys here, Ray. I'm just going to jump in here because, as we know, social media is just a collection of criticism. That's the essence of it. And not just in wartime, but period. Alexander Ovechkin's Instagram profile still includes the profile picture with him and Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. Has angered so many around the world, not just here in Canada or in North America. How do each of you think Ovechkin's legacy is going to be tainted, if at all, by this? And I'm not talking just about the profile pic here. Let's be serious. I'm just talking about his history with Putin and, man, the fact that he doesn't really seem willing to completely disconnect.
I'll go first, Gord, because you'll have a wider view, a larger view of it. And maybe this is more of an emotional construct from me, is that I don't think it's going to, it will damage his legacy as a player, but I think history will judge him with far more complication. People would like him to be way more firm.
Yeah.
Maybe he feels he can't, but there's also a sidebar to it that maybe he won't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it all depends on what you want to believe. Like the Instagram thing is like, to me, that's like, it's either tone deaf or you're giving everybody else the finger with it. I really don't like that. Mm-hmm. I thought it's a really impossible spot for him to try and defend a position at a news conference.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's far more complicated than just answering a question from journalist A or journalist B. Mm-hmm. But as this goes along, if it's on the path it is, I don't think history will judge him as favorably.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think, so to unpack this a couple of ways. Number one, I think Ovechkin's in a very difficult position because taking the picture down from Instagram, he's got family back in Russia. So that would be seen as a tacit opposition to Putin and the war. So even by taking the picture down without saying something, that would be seen as opposition. The problem he has is he put himself in this position. He, more than any other Russian athlete, hockey player, we'll say, was supportive of Putin, was cozy with Putin, and very supportive of him. So he has to wear that because he's done that for a long time. So to say to him, for him to say at this point, I don't want to comment on politics. Well, you already have. Correct. So you've done that. Other athletes who have stayed silent. I'm not sure what Evgeny Malkin's supposed to say at this point. He's never been, political in any way. I mean, right. What's he supposed to say? And so, I think that, to your question, Darren, I think that Ovechkin's legacy will certainly be tied up in this. I don't know if it'll define him, but it certainly becomes part of the narrative. Someone like René Fizell, who has been an outspoken supporter of Putin, who is on a contract with the Russian Federation now, and who made a statement yesterday that was just, I don't know,
appalling.
Yeah,
it was appalling.
Tone deaf, appalling. Just, I mean, incredibly, basically saying, well, Canada and Russia played in the Cold War in the 70s. The IIHF shouldn't have barred Russia and Belarus. Yeah, but Canada and Russia, neither of them was involved in a war at the time. So Fizell has shown his true colors, and this will forever taint his legacy. He will now be remembered. This will be the thing he'll be most remembered for. And any of the good he did as the president of the IIHF, which was getting NHL players in the Olympics or promoting women's hockey or promoting the growth of hockey, that all goes out the window. He becomes known as Putin's stooge. And at a time when the people of the world were speaking out, and he doesn't have, family in Russia. All he has is economic ties to Russia and financial self-interest. He's already a very rich man. So a person like him will forever poison his legacy.
So as we, there is the sport connection, of course, which is what brings us all together. The responses from around the world, from hockey leagues, from the IIHF, from my view, have been pretty substantial and really about all that can be done. I'm really interested. I saw Marcus Granlund left his team in Ufa today. One of the leading scorers in the league, and he left. Yeah. And I don't know if there's more of that coming, but what's your thought on what we've seen from the, I guess at the top is the IIHF, and then from the member leagues around Europe.
Yeah, I think that, and I'll be careful not to go into a rabbit hole of how international politics and sport and business, intersect. But you saw the tepid announcement by FIFA at first, right? Right. Remember FIFA saying that, well, Russian players could compete under the Russian football banner, and that was universally panned. So the question would be, well, why would FIFA do that? Well, it's very simple: financial self-interest. Massive TV deals with Russians. Russia buys massive TV deals to televise these events. Russia is one of the largest countries in the world. and big audiences, and also Russian sponsors. Gazprom, the Russian state energy company, is one of the biggest sponsors of sporting events for FIFA, UEFA, and yes, the IIHF. So FIFA, I think took a very tepid step and got rightly crushed for it. I think the IIHF's statement was much more direct and was much more hard hitting. And you guys know, we've all been to Russia, and I've been 15 times. Sport means more in Russia than perhaps anywhere else. It is a vessel of national identity. Going back to the Soviet times, Russians have used sport as an image of their superiority. And I remember saying a couple of years ago that the myth of the Soviet hockey teams, that they were dominant, pervades in Russia. They were never dominant. They won lots of world championships and Olympic gold medals when the other countries couldn't send their best players. But best on best, all they've ever won is the 81 Canada Cup.
Gord, if I could just jump in here, remember when we went to, well, I know you do, we were in St. Petersburg, and we had this wonderful woman who was a guide that took us through the Hermitage Museum, because if I would have gone in there myself, I would have still been in there. I would have never found the door.
This is true.
And so we took a break and we had a coffee, and Gord at this time mentions that I used to play in the NHL, and she was, she was a big hockey fan.
Yeah.
And so we got around somehow in the discussion of talking about the 72 series. And I said, yeah, I used to watch it. I watched it with my dad. And she watched it on her father's lap when she was a little girl. She said, and when we won, I'm like, what do you mean when you won? Canada won. That was not their story.
No, their story was
like, it was astounding in that moment.
Come on.
No,
I'm not, Gord.
No, but in their mind, facing the evil North America professionals, the amateur Soviets, despite having their best player, attacked and having his leg broken, that was a victory for them. So I think that you guys have seen it. I mean,
like the importance of it, Gord. The importance of it to her. Like, there was a point there where, like, okay, this conversation is not going to go any further.
And I've seen Russian broadcasters in tears. When their country loses a gold medal. I remember Canada beating the Russians in the gold medal game at the World Championship, and Russian broadcasters in tears. Like, there's so much. It's why the doping was so rampant. It is their national identity is so tied into athletics and other things, but primarily athletics. That's why, to your point, Ray, kicking them out of the IIHF and stripping away the World Junior Championship coming up in December is a huge blow to them. They built a new arena in Novosibirsk for that event. So it's a huge part of the identity. So for the IIHF to step up like that is a major step. The IOC is saying that Russian and Belarusian Paralympians can compete under the IOC flag. I guess, the Paralympics start Friday. I guess that's, but this is it sounds like an awful thing to say, but these sporting organizations aren't stupid. They're not run by dumb people. And as much as there's allegations of corruption, I don't know if there's as much corruption as people think. There's greed. Now, greed and corruption might be the same thing. But what FIFA was doing was trying to protect its financial interest with Gazprom and Russian TV. That's what they were trying to do, to try to find a middle ground. But there's no middle ground right now.
So World Championships coming up in Finland, right?
Yeah.
And that's the first big one, with all due respect. And then obviously you've got the World Juniors. You've got so many events where Belarus and Russia will not be part of. But in Finland, it takes a stronger hold. Like, I'm looking, at some of the news clippings earlier this morning, and they're ripping the sign off Hartwell Arena in Helsinki. Like, that World Championship, Gord, for you is going to be different, and that's an understatement.
So Hartwell is the sponsor of the arena. So it'd be like, Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. Hartwell has removed their sponsorship. So again, sport, politics, business intersecting. Jari Kurri and his group are the majority owners of Jokerit Helsinki, which plays in the KHL. So they've just withdrawn themselves from the KHL playoffs. They may, in fact, go back and play in the Finnish league. But the minority owner of the team and the owner of the arena is a Russian oligarch who is on the sanctions list. So my guess is the World Championship will be moved out of what has been known as Hartwall Arena in the Helsinki suburbs to the IFK Arena, which, Ray, you've been to. Smaller, but in downtown. Doesn't have the amount of suites, doesn't have the sort of amenities, like wouldn't have all the dressing rooms, for example, to accommodate 8 teams. They'll have to use trailers or something like that. But I would imagine that'll be the case. And Ray, you and I were in Imatra, Finland a few years ago when the World Junior was there. Team Canada had training camp up there. You are 7 miles from the Russian border. You're 10 kilometers from the Russian border in Imatra. The Finns, as much as anyone, and the Latvians and Lithuanians, they live on the border with Russia. And the Finns are not members of NATO. So they are keenly aware of the risks here. And so that would be my suggestion. I think, for the Finns to beat the Swedes in international competition, that's like beating your brother, right? For the Finns to beat the Russians in international competition is like beating your arch enemy, is like beating the person you hate the most. And that rivalry takes on very different connotations than the Finnish-Swedish rivalry. So I think the World Championship will be fascinating this year, because I think the way that people are rallying around Ukraine and certainly isolating Russia will be a big part of that. And it also deprives Russia of what is one of its major propaganda vehicles, which is sport.
Yeah. Well, trying to think where we go from here. I mean, it's just a daily process, right? Like, honestly.
Right. Well, we'll see. We're going to see what happens with the men's worlds in 23. So they're scheduled for
Right.
St. Petersburg in May of 23. Now, again, they've built a new arena there, a brand new 21,000 seat arena, one of the largest arenas in the world. And the whole thing was that's going to debut at the World Championship and show off, sort of Russian, wealth and superiority. We'll see. I mean, I think the IIHF did what they did through 2022 to see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the next step would be to strip them of that World Championship. And the World Junior, in 23 is a blow to them, and it'll just carry on without them. And, I think the Russians, their goal was to build the KHL. The Russian goal is to build the KHL into a league that could rival the NHL. It never has. It never has. You could argue it's the 3rd or 4th best league in the world. And Ray, your sons played overseas. You could argue that, and one of the reasons that the KHL teams won't play in the Champions League in Europe is they're afraid they'll lose. So we've heard
the reason players go to play there is because there are a few teams that pay crazy money,
right? Insane money. And they lose. And
that's why
insane money. Yari Kuri's team has lost an average of 13 million euros a year since it joined the KHL. So so 13 million euros. I'd have to check the exchange, but I think probably $20 million in that range a year.
Mm-hmm. It's a chunk.
Yeah.
Well, for anybody, you got something else, Ray?
No, I just go ahead. No.
You look frustrated.
I'm just going to go down another avenue.
But before we leave this topic, though, the International Committee of the Red Cross, if you want to do something, go to their website and donate. That's something tangible you can do right now. Is to go to the Red Cross website and donate for humanitarian aid, food, medicine. That's something tangible that we can all do.
Yeah.
Well, when we put the podcast up, I think it's certainly the least we can do is to put the link there as well, so people can just click in that easily. It is staggering times we live in right now. It really is. Yeah. And I hope your friends are okay, Gord.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, and for those who don't follow you, and there wouldn't be many, Gord, you're a wealth of information on all hockey fronts. Follow Gord Miller on Twitter, on social media, because it's added value. You don't just get that cutting wit around the world of hockey. You also get the serious stuff too. So thanks for joining us as always, Gord, and I can't wait for your 4th appearance.
Thanks, guys.